Hello and welcome to the deVere live webinar series. My name is Trayford and this is our 17th webinar. I'm very delighted to be joined today by Jamie Beaton from Crimson Education, talking about, does a university education pay off? Now, I'll introduce Jamie a little bit in more detail later on, but let me first just run through what the format is going to be today. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to put into a poll into the webinar because we want to know your opinion. We want to know your opinion on what global universities or what regions around the world you would be most interested in for your children. We'll then hand over to Jamie, who will be presenting on our topic today. And I'm sure during that presentation, you're going to have a lot of questions that you want to ask to Jamie. So what you'll see at the bottom of your screen is a chat box. Okay, in that chat box, what you'll need to do is select all panelists and attendees, and then put your question into the chat box. Other people can see your question, and that will also inspire other questions that I'll put to Jamie at the end of his presentation. And then what we'll also do at the end is to give you another opportunity to say, okay, love the webinar, but I want to know more. Okay, and we'll give you that opportunity towards the end. So first of all, let me just put this poll in. And what we want to know is, where would you prefer your child to go to university? Is it in the UK? Is it USA? Is it mainland Europe? Is it Asia or somewhere else? UK, USA, mainland Europe, Asia or somewhere else. And I will leave that up so that you can vote as you go through. So Jamie, if you want to turn your camera and mic on. Jamie is a co-founder of Crimson Education. He studied at, well, quite a few different places, Harvard, Stanford, University of Oxford, I'm sure there are others, and has grown Crimson Education with over 23 offices around the world with 200 full-time staff. Quite an incredible achievement at just the young age of 25. And with that, Jamie, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, and awesome to be here. We're going to give you a fast run through as to, do these overseas universities really pay off? You know, what are the pathways to get in, and what are some realistic outcomes you can expect to achieve in going down this pathway? Now, to give some quick context on Crimson, our goal really is to help students getting the best possible university for them. Many students are obviously aiming for great schools like Stanford, Harvard, Yale, Oxford, etc. And we send a number of kids every year to these schools. But we are also thinking about, one's fit, one's personality, one's personal characteristics, and what school best aligns to them. So our goal is to help guide families along that journey. Now, I'll start with the results because it's very important to focus on this. Our families choose to work with Crimson because we are very successful at getting kids into these top universities. So far, we've gotten more than 1,400 offers, top 50 US colleges, and just over 250 Ivy League offers. Most notably, we've had 50 Oxford admits, and we've had 80 to Penn, including about 30 to Wharton, which is a top business school in the world for undergrads, as well as a cool 28 to Harvard. So at this point, we've seen it all as far as these top schools, both joint degrees and the most popular colleges in the world. And we can speak to that in today's Q&A. So just quickly, what does it take to gain admission to these top schools? Applying to the US is a multi-year journey. Typically, one is building candidacy over a 4-year period. And over that 4-year period, you're looking at a lot of different factors. Academics, which will include things like the SATs and the ACTs, the SAT subject tests, which are 1-hour multi-choice tests, testing you in areas like biology, chemistry, physics, etc. And then you've got your in-school grades, and you might use external curriculums like, for example, the IB, the A-levels, the AP. Many top schools are using these curriculums these days. Next up is the extracurriculars. What's quite unusual about the US is the big focus on extracurricular activities. So students are often focusing on long-term projects. So students are doing things like research with universities, or creating apps, or creating charitable groups around core themes they may have, like, for example, robotics. Then there's the actual application itself, which is quite a body of work. There's the main application essay called the Common Application, which goes to all the main schools. Then there's the supplementary essays, which is school specific. So if you're applying to a school like Stanford, you answer questions like, for example, what matters to you most and why? Write a letter to your future roommate and describe what you want to tell them. There's also recommendations from teachers, an interview process, and you submit 10 extracurriculars you've been involved in the last 4 years. There's also additional information you can submit as well. So it's a very holistic personality view of a student, not just looking at academics, but cultural context, perspective, activities, this kind of thing. Moving to the UK, things become a lot more single focus on academics. So on the academic side, there is, again, the IB, the APs, the A-levels. The UK takes a wide variety of curriculums under consideration in evaluating your candidacy. Now, the expectation in the UK isn't to do all of extracurriculars. In fact, what one must do is this thing called supercurriculars, which basically are subject-specific activities that really go deep in the area. So, for example, I applied to King's College, Cambridge for economics. And for that application, I, for example, did a couple of research papers. I competed in a monetary policy competition, and I also did things like A-level business studies and A-level economics outside of school, as well as a reading list of various economics books to help me learn things like game theory and behavioral finance. So all of these things related to my area of interest that I was actually applying for. That's a big difference. In the UK, you choose a particular subject to apply for. Whether in the US, you're often applying to a general school in which you can choose the major once you get in, and you can switch as well. The final part of the UK that's worth noting is the personal statement is highly structured on the academic subject you're applying for. In the US, it's more like a creative writing piece, showcasing parts of your personality, what makes you special, but in the UK, it's very focused on the personal statement. Then certain schools like Oxford and Cambridge will have interviews, which are actually being conducted online this year for many of the colleges, then entrance exams, like for example, the thinking skills assessment, which will test you in a particular skill that the university is looking for the subject you're applying to. And that varies based on whether you're applying for law or for medicine. Now, in reality, most applicants that are competitive tend to apply to both the US and the UK, and that's a natural strategy. It's what I did as well in applying to a wide variety. Now, overall, the US and UK are countries which require significant investments in education relative to other places as domestic students. But as an international student, the price to go to, for example, Australia or Canada, the US, the UK, there is some variance, by $20,000, $30,000 or so, but ballpark, traditionally, it's between a sort of 40 to 60K USD investment, per year into the colleges. Now, on the flip side, the main benefit of this is the hard financial return people observe. And I'm going to give you some examples of real Crimson students that have been through the process and are now working in the job market to give you a sense of what kind of salaries they're earning. But it is quite common for graduates going into technology, finance, and consulting to be earning above 100,000 USD post-graduation. When you look at the salary data from these schools, often there's people doing things like charitable work or going into things like teaching as well, which drags down the average. But if you are going into those commercial domains, that is, of course, relevant. Now, when you consider your decision to invest in a US or UK education, you want to look at this like any other financial decision, whether it be buying a house, a stock, another kind of insurance or asset purchase. So what are the costs? What are the tuition costs? What are the living costs? What are the tutoring costs? What's the cost for the consultant? What does the all-in cost for this look like? And what is the financial return on investment? So basically, in terms of return on investment, what you want to think about is what would you earn if you stayed within your home country? And what would you earn being in the US labor market or being in the UK labor market? What's that gap? And how does that widen over the various years? Now at Crimson, we focus on the world's most competitive, high-octane universities because these are the schools that consistently give students a fantastic return on investment, where they can invest in their consultant, they can then pay the tuition fees, they can be very assured of consistently growing earnings of a high caliber in these various places. Now, these are the tangible factors, the factors that sort of would go into a spreadsheet and would, appeal to a more business-minded parent. But there are other factors like, for example, experience. What price do you put on being surrounded by students from around the world, being able to interact with Nobel Prize-winning professors, being able to participate in research and other kinds of summer activities? These are all things that have a monetary value of some form, and as a parent, you've got to form a judgment as to how important those things are for you. Some families really want their child exposed to, for example, my old economics teacher at Harvard, Larry Summers, used to be the president of Harvard and the chief economist of the World Bank. That was a mind-blowing experience. Others wouldn't put as much focus on that. Finally, there's suitability. Does the school suit your needs and your academic performance so far? If you go to a school you're not equipped for and you fail there, you're going to have a low grade point average. That's going to affect your ability to get a good job post that degree. So it's important that you choose a degree you can succeed in, which is where that suitability dimension comes into our framework. So overall, top universities tend to be defined by, high rankings, top faculty, world-class facilities, a global student body made up of people from around the world, small class sizes, great graduate salaries, good internships, and the alumni community, all of which give you quite a big advantage. One thing that I'd mention is in the 1950s, the top 10 companies in the world have all disappeared from that position. But the top 10 universities in the world as of the 1950s are still the same top 10 approximately today, except Stanford's gotten better. Universities are one of the most inelastic goods of all, where basically there's continually growing demand, but there's fixed slots. So with anyone that's done a bit of microeconomics, it's easy to understand why these degrees get significantly better over time as the selectivity of these things grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. So now that it's been 7 years at Crimson, we've sent more than 1,000 students to these top universities. We've seen many students go from high school to their elite universities and now into their careers. So now I'm going to give you a bit of a dive into a couple of our examples of our alumni to show you how this works in practice. So this boy is Samir Singh. Now, Samir basically joined us and he wasn't that sure what he wanted to do. We guided him towards computer science and math based on some diagnostics we ran on Samir's academics. We then trained him in terms of our leadership counseling service, extra A-levels. He took 6 A-levels with our online school program. And then we went ahead and got him into Stanford, Harvard, and 4 other Ivy League schools. He was dux of his school. Now, he went to Harvard, which basically obviously is amazing, but the story doesn't stop there. In his first summer, we helped place him in an internship at a business growth center called the Ice House. But then the next summer, he went to work at Bridgewater, which is the world's largest hedge fund, run by a famous hedge fund manager called Ray Dalio, a billionaire who did his MBA at Harvard Business School. Most recently, when he finished college, he then got into Y Combinator, which is Silicon Valley's top business incubator, raising $140,000 US for his startup company. At the age of 22, he's becoming his own CEO. So that's very, very exciting, going from not knowing anything about coding to being able to run his own Silicon Valley company and work for the world's best hedge fund. Next up is Zong. So Zong came to us and he was very passionate about engineering. So we thought, well, Zong, why don't you actually go quite deep in mechanical engineering? That could be a really good fit for your interests. So we recommended him a variety of subjects during high school, extra research, some internships. We helped him structure a summer program. We helped him with the application essays and teamwork with him. And then he got into Caltech, which is one of the highest ranked engineering schools in America. He also won a full ride, a full scholarship to Duke University. And then after he got in, he's since been able to achieve a perfect 4.0 GPA at Caltech. What's impressive, he's worked at NASA. Every young person who dreams of space thinks about NASA. He worked for NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in their autonomous vehicle team. Now he's gone to work for Waymo, which is Google's autonomous driving company, which is the world leader in autonomous cars, or cars that drive themselves. So he went from being an international student to being an engineer in one of these top programs, now going to MIT for his master's degree. And he's on a salary of more than $130,000 US. So that is quite an impressive salary to be on. Samir over here was at an annualized salary of about $120,000 USD, age 22 at Bridgewater. So very impressive numbers for these young ones that go through the program and are seeing that hard financial return post their graduation. I'll now move to May. And of the various students I've spoken about so far, he's quite interested in finance. So he came along to us. We helped him take 11 AS subjects and about 9 A-levels through our online teaching. We've got a fully registered school called the Crimson Global Academy. Our students use to take extra A-levels. It's very popular, particularly in some of the more competitive schools in Shanghai and Beijing. Now, we helped get May into Stanford, Princeton, Wharton, as well as other schools in the UK, Ivy League schools like Brown. Now, we helped recommend him to take a gap year, which was part of the program, and he learned Mandarin in China. In his first summer at Stanford, we got a job offer from McKinsey, which is the world's top management consulting firm. That's an annualized salary of about $110,000 USD when you work there full time. We helped place him in a top hedge fund in our network called Weiss Asset Management, a hedge fund that I myself used to work at actually, and built a good relationship with their recruiting team. and he's actually going to go back there full time when he graduates, probably on a salary around the $150,000 mark. And there's room to run very quickly in that hedge fund because it is a top hedge fund. Now, at Stanford, Amay is following in my footsteps. At Harvard, I did a master's degree and a bachelor's degree in 3 years. Now, Amay is doing his master's in computer science alongside his bachelor's in management science and engineering. So he's finishing his 4-year Stanford program with computer science, engineering, and business all down. That's a very employable young man. So we're very proud of Amay at Stanford, and he's done a great job on campus. He's also been involved in some of the research opportunities, and he's been involved in the student-run investing group called the Kudla Fund. So that's very exciting for Amay. So ultimately, the point I want to make, we've sent students now to Blackstone, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Google, Facebook, Amazon, the list goes on. We've had, multiple Rhodes Scholars, etc. When you go to these top schools, there's a huge advantage, which is the top companies come to you to recruit. Goldman Sachs turns up. McKinsey turns up. If you want to try and get into, say, McKinsey from, say, the local universities in, say, New Zealand, they take 1 per year or 2 per year. From Harvard, they take about 30. So basically, the access is just unparalleled. And in the alumni community, when you reach out to alumni, they respond to you quickly because they want to help fellow Ivy League alumni, fellow top US school alumni. That mentorship really, really helps you. So overall, you can try and get into these firms from other universities, but the schools want to focus on where can they go to get the top talent consistently. And that is the world's elite universities, which is why this powerful cycle continues, where smart kids go to these top universities, and then you get these top jobs, and the cycle continues. And in areas like finance, your background really matters a lot to which firms will employ you. So how do we help you as Crimson? What do we do? What's our part of the journey? How does that work? First up, we help students with passion discovery, career discovery. So do they want to go into hedge funds, venture capital? Do they want to be computer scientists, product managers? Do they want to, for example, become an investment banker? Do they want to become an architect, a lawyer? We've got comprehensive diagnostics. We can introduce you to our mentors in these various industries to help our young students figure out what path is more interesting. We then help them to launch projects in these areas. For example, one of my boys, Lucas, who's now an investment banker in New York, he ran a survey company which helped finance companies research young people's beliefs on certain consumer products like Abercrombie and Fitch, the shopping company. The clothing company. We also help with grade improvement at school. We've got an army of teachers. I in high school used tutors for math, English, biology, chemistry, physics, SAT, math, etc. Our students will often use tutors across their A-levels, their IB, their SAT to make them learn faster. In high school, I got through 140 hours of course content and things like further maths in 30 or 40 hours. So that kind of efficiency is important for our children. Next up, we help students with what we call acceleration. Top schools like Stanford want to see intellectual vitality, which means stretching yourself beyond what other kids are doing at your school. So throughout online high school, you can take extra A-levels, more subjects at a younger age. You can take online courses throughout organizations like Coursera, where you can do machine learning courses, game design courses, things like this. And you can also get involved in extracurriculars that are competitive academic programs, like for example, Mathematics Olympiad, where we have many of the world's top coaches for that area. Next up is helping to package the student with the amazing application essays. We work with the student to help them create fantastic essays, helping them think of great topics, and then guiding them through the process of brainstorming, iterating, changing their language techniques, and then submitting these wonderful essays to these schools with detailed research about each school. Because when you apply for Stanford, you've got to write a lot about why you like Stanford. When you apply for Yale, you've got to do the same thing. And these have got to be very, very specific. So we help the students with those research nuances that are also important in standing out these days. And then finally, there's a strategy. Most kids competing for these schools are putting in a lot of work, right? So work alone is not going to get you in. You need a good strategy. So for example, in high school, one of my competitors was doing the violin diploma, the ATCL diploma in violin, and I was doing the ATCL diploma in communications. This boy spent 300 hours on his violin diploma, and I spent about 30 on my communications diploma. Harvard viewed them pretty equally because of the similar qualification, but I saved 270 hours. I did many more A-levels, had more balance, played some more sports, and was able to beat that competitor to my spot at Harvard. So that kind of strategy is an example of where, you can't just do a bit of everything. You've got to be pretty ruthless with focusing on what matters, where you're going to have a competitive advantage, what the schools are going to care about. So on the passion side, you're connected to these top mentors from schools like Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, Columbia, Wharton through our network. You have extracurricular coaches that help you launch these projects. On the grade side, you're often getting coached with people that have scored a perfect score. For example, in English, I scored top in the world in A-level English literature, and I often provide guidance on English to some of our students. We have other tutors that are domain experts in things like computer science or mathematics. On the academics, we can help you accelerate academically with our Crimson Global Academy, led by the famous headmaster John Morris, who won a merit from the Queen of England. And then on the writing process, we start that nice and early with structured writing programs to train you in writing, which is a skill you need to succeed in the US and UK in the job market, whether you're an engineer, a data scientist, or a trader. And then finally, you've got a strategist, somebody like me. We've got a full-time army of strategists at Crimson that help our students with their structured plan, going through this backed by data from our algorithms. My background's applied math. Many of my team have built various algorithms for hedge funds on Wall Street. We've applied that logic to college admissions to make sure that students can accurately see what their odds are of getting in, and we can use that data to help inform our recommendations for their strategy so Crimson kids come out on top. Now, we've built a fantastic software platform that ties it all together, that uses various pieces of technology to match students and tutors based on personality. From a PhD psychologist, Galen Buckwater, students can give feedback on every session, they can book in lessons, they can access our content library, which has got thousands of videos about these top universities, and they can track their program. So overall, if you want to join the conversation, there's a couple of ways you can do that. First up, we've got a wonderful WeChat group. It's a big community of people across China and the world that want to understand how can my child gain a competitive advantage in getting into these top schools? How do I, parenting advice on summer programs, etc. So join the WeChat community and we'll keep you up to speed on developments, upcoming events, webinars just like this that often go into actually more detail. And then if you do want to actually speak to one of our academic advisors, how that process looks is you'll reach out. You can use this middle WeChat scanning QR code, or you can direct message us. The email here is below at n.landau@crimsoneducation.org. And one of our team will meet with you for about an hour. They'll assess your academics, give you some diagnostics, figure out what the game plan could be, what schools are achievable, and then go ahead and recommend the right program for you if we're a good fit. Now, Crimson isn't right for all families. For some families, the student's not of sufficient academic ability for us to help. But generally speaking, we're able to add a lot of value and help amplify the child's potential. And to speak to us early, a lot of our students start with us around age 11 to 14. We've got some of the later crew coming in, 15, 16, but that early age is kind of the sweet spot because as a reminder, the US application process is the last 4 years of high school. And so you want to be sort of trained with a good strategy before you begin that intensive 4-year process. So you're not sort of inventing things on the fly. The other thing that I briefly mentioned is our webinars. During the coronavirus environment, we've been providing webinars around the world from top speakers like Larry Summers, who used to be the president of Harvard, John Key, former New Zealand Prime Minister, top consultants from Crimson, admissions officers from top universities like Stanford, Harvard, etc. So you should learn from these webinars and get insight about the process to learn more about whether this is the right pathway, for you. I can say with passion that Harvard changed my life. I was from New Zealand, a pretty far-flung country with 4.5 million people. I never heard of Wall Street. I never heard of investing. I wouldn't know how to find investors for a business. Going to Harvard helped me to, build a global company with more than 250 full-time staff, raise more than 60 million in capital from some of the world's best investors. And many of my employees are alumni from the schools that I attended or those of my team over time. And so this is a good example of the kind of resources these schools give you if you can get into one of the top schools. But I would stress that my final year in high school was actually the most stressful year of my life. More stressful than Harvard, Stanford, Oxford, Wall Street, or building Crimson. And so it's important you've got the right support. We provide that structured guidance at Crimson to make sure that you are getting through the process, you're building the candidacy, but at the same time, you're not overly stressed because you want the children to be succeeding, stretched, but not too much. And that's a very important balance that we can achieve with our inspirational mentors for the young ones. So get in touch with us, leverage our content, and the most important thing that I would say is these schools really continue to pay dividends for your entire adult life. To this day, when I approach partners, when I work with employees, the schools that I've been to help me to have credibility in that room, even as a young person. And so I encourage you for your own children to think about that advantage and how you can build that for them. And definitely, without a doubt, the US and the UK are the main home for that kind of advantage in schooling. Thank you very much. And I look forward to taking your questions later on in today's webinar.
Great. Thank you so much, Jamie. That's a lot of information. It's really, really useful. And I'm sure some more questions are going to come in. But first of all, I just actually want to stop your share screen for a moment, and it'll just be us on the screen. Perfect. Let me just check. Yeah. So what we can do is just wanted to get your opinion on the poll, actually. So we asked where the most popular place people would like to go. So USA came top of the list. Is that with 33%, followed by mainland Europe, then other. Wonder whether is that fairly common from what you see? Do most people want to head to the US? What's the general?
Yeah, so usually USA is number one pick, followed by the UK. Canada and Australia are quite popular. The Middle East is not that popular, but there are some schools like New York University, Abu Dhabi that are quite good. In Singapore, there's the Yale-NUS collaboration. But the USA is sort of the dominant country of choice for most families, followed by the UK. And that's because, off the top 20 highest ranked universities in the world, typically about 15 or 16 are from the US and UK. So that tends to be where things go. And also the economy is very strong in these places. There's great technology companies, fantastic investors, financial services sectors in London and New York, etc. So US and UK tend to be the option of choice for most families.
Yeah. And then would you say there's a particular university that ends up on everyone's wish list?
Definitely. I mean, we hear Harvard a lot. Harvard, Stanford, very popular, MIT. Wharton is the world's best undergraduate business school. So if you're an 18-year-old confident you want to go into business, Wharton's amazing for that. Over in the UK, Oxford and Cambridge, naturally, but you've also got programs like London School of Economics, where there's specialist degrees like, for example, accounting and finance, which train you very well to become, for example, an investment banker. Then there are these joint degrees that are quite popular now. For example, you can go to Brown, which is an Ivy League school, as well as RISD, the Rhode Island School of Design, and do a degree that combines an Ivy League degree plus an arts degree, which appeals to parents and students that don't want to go full out on the art, but want to continue that passion alongside a very employable Ivy League degree. So there are a couple of the sort of popular options we see regularly. The last one that throw out there would be the UC schools, University of California schools. California is a wonderful place to live, great weather, great environment, very diverse, big Chinese communities across California. And as a result, the UC schools like UC Berkeley, UCLA are huge crowd favorites amongst our families. So there are a couple of the schools that I'd call out.
Okay, excellent. So we had a question come in before the webinar in our WeChat group. How many applicants get a scholarship?
Got it. So at Harvard, 60% of students are on financial aid. And of those, 1/3 pay nothing at all. So for example, one of my boys, Sam Taylor, just got into Harvard. He's only paying $4,000 US a year to go to Harvard, including accommodation, flights, and tuition. What I would emphasize is that these scholarships for the Ivy League schools are based on financial need. So they look at families' income, assets, dependents, like for example, any other kids, any grandparents you're responsible for, and they see how much do we think that this family can afford, and they give them a subsidy based on that for some of the top schools. As you apply to some of the lower ranked schools, if you ask for financial aid, then basically you typically are going to be disadvantaged in the process. So long story short, a lot of applicants get scholarships. Every year we see many. Our students won about 60 million in financial aid so far. And there are also merit-based scholarships for athletes and for academics. A famous one would be, for example, the Robertson Scholarship, which is a full ride to Duke University overall. The UK is a bit more dry in terms of scholarships for international students, but the US is plentiful, and every year a lot of our kids get scholarships.
Okay, and they're presumably mainly international students as well that are applying. It's not just domestic students that would get scholarships or financial aid in general.
Yeah, everything I've said refers to international students. Of course, for domestic students, there's even more scholarships, but for international students, there's plenty of scholarships available for these programs, and many of our families do want to investigate that.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. So, I mean, in terms of, let's sort of, we'll lead on to the next sort of question. So, taking scholarships out of the picture for a moment, how much does it cost to go to university as of today? Obviously, you know, some parents will have, you know, 5, 6-year-olds at the moment, teenagers in all different scales, and we know obviously the price of university goes up every year. But as of today, what would the sort of average course look like in terms of cost, or is it dependent on different courses?
Ballpark, if you go to one of the top US schools and you pay full fees, so I'm assuming the family does not qualify for financial aid. They're going to, which is an assumption, but that will be 60K USD per year. So about 240,000 USD for the tuition. And then you've got to think about, you know, schooling, right? So private schools typically are going to cost about, you know, between 20 to 60 grand USD per year. You might be sending your child through that private school for ballpark, say 10 years, which could add another 200 to 600K to the bill. So all up, you're looking at around $1 million USD for a rigorous international education all the way through to the top degree, assuming you're going through private schooling and assuming you're not applying for financial aid. On the flip side, take this boy, Sam Taylor, the boy that got into Harvard recently, you know, on a full scholarship. He went to public school all his life and he's paying $5 grand per year, which is cheaper than his local school. So overseas study in the US can be a $1 million USD plus investment if you are a financially, you know, equipped family and you want to go hard to give your child the best possible resources. But you can also do this, you know, on a shoestring budget if you wish. But the success rate obviously tends to be higher if you're investing heavily behind the pathway. So I'd call it ballpark $1 million, $1 million per child if you're doing this in sort of the heavy investment way that most of our, you know, families in Shanghai are proceeding.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say our typical clients or, you know, international people that we see here, they're presumably earning good salaries here already, then they'll need to start putting something away, because I guess unless presumably they've got a child that's getting amazing grades and they're, you know, earning scholarships, and financial aid presumably wouldn't be available for them if they can prove that they've got good income, I'd assume. So that's how it's structured.
That's right. Yeah. So saving is pretty essential. Like you want to ideally create an education account, you know, and be able to invest in a long-term, you know, deposit structure, and you know, be able to keep committing capital to that over time. I think that's very wise. And a lot of our families do start saving early when the kids are sort of, you know, between 5 to 10 years out from college. It's very classic in America to have a college fund to fund the kids' college education. So I'd encourage families to pursue options like that.
Yeah. Okay. And that kind of answers the first question we've had come in. Sort of how early should you start saving? Do you have a guideline that you tend to guide your clients with?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on obviously your you know, average income, you know, your assets, your rate of appreciation on assets, and how forecastable your earnings are. You know, if you're an entrepreneur and, you know, your income is uncertain in the future, then I think starting to save, you know, about 8 years out is a good strategy. Even earlier if you can. If you are in a more sort of consistently predictable financial position, maybe you're working for a big corporate, you're in a government, you know, leadership role, for example, then, you know, you can start saving a little bit later because you have that forecastable earnings coming in. But I'd say ballpark, you know, 8 years out is probably a good guide. And then as far as when you should start preparing on the application side, I mean, you know, I had pretty intensive math and English tutoring since I was like 3, and then it ramped up over time. So I think you want to begin the journey of academic growth from a young age. The specific process as far as US applications, UK applications, that can begin when you're about, you know, 12 to 14. But you want to have, you know, a strong academic culture at home, that kind of thing. So I'd say, you know, financially 8 years out, academically typically 4 to 6 years out.
Yeah. Okay. And have you seen any changes recently? I mean, obviously we following financial markets and currency fluctuations, and, you know, people, for example, after 2016, when the UK voted to leave the European Union, saw the pound drop and people were investing in UK assets. Have you seen any pickup in people going to UK university because suddenly it's cheaper than it was, you know, 5 years ago?
So I think generally speaking, if you do the math here, right, you're looking at what is the salary differential between what you would earn coming out of these schools and what you would have earned, say, staying locally. So you look at, you know, all those free cash flows, and then you subtract, of course, the tuition cost. But the reality is, you know, many families would rather spend another $20,000 a year on tuition and get into a, you know, higher ranked school. And so it's very rare for us to see a family that would say, go to the UK over the US to save a small amount of tuition dollars, because ultimately the biggest driver of value is the return on investment, which is, what companies does my son or daughter get access to, post this degree, and what does that look like? And so we haven't seen a cost-based shift to the UK amongst our segment very much at all. Of course, families enjoy a bit of a currency windfall when they can get it, but they typically are not optimizing to save sort of 20% of the process, because the best university is going to have a much greater rate of return for a family than sort of the fifth best, for example. So I think there is that focus on best, even if the price is a bit more.
Yeah. And I guess emotion comes into it as well, right? I mean, there will be the school that they desired to go to, or perhaps there was a family member that went to that school or something like that as well. So that, I'm sure that comes into it as well, is it?
Definitely. Students are often going to have, their dream schools, their first choice schools. That's going to be a big point of focus for the family. It's quite rare that I see, a student who's not applying for financial aid to, be acutely aware of like the marginal tuition differences. Typically the family is quite committed to the student getting into the school they best want, for their future. So I think that's very accurate. I'd also say that, some families applying do have what's called legacy status, which is quite interesting. So in the US, basically, if let's say, you go to Harvard and then your child wants to apply to Harvard, their odds of getting in are about 4 to 5 times higher than if they apply without that connection. So the US puts value on parents or, siblings attending the school. In the UK, this isn't the case. So if you went to Oxford, your child has got no benefit in terms of getting improved odds to Oxford, but this is a big deal in the US. Now, it's still a small portion of students overall, because most kids coming into these schools have no previous connection to the school. But for a small minority, typically 10% or less, there is this kind of legacy factor, which, of course, would have an impact on what schools you're applying for. It's quite common for me to see parents that have gone to, say, Cornell or Harvard to push their kids to that school to get these kind of alumni benefits and to extend that sort of family connection to one institution. So I think that's well said, that comment you made.
Okay, great. And then the dreaded COVID-19. So, I mean, can you see that changing the way that people study? And I know that some universities, certainly sort of the last terms of this year, and even proposing the next year, that people study remotely, and lots of different institutions are finding out different ways. Do you see any changes coming to the way people study?
So fundamentally, why people choose to pursue the US, UK is largely for the quality of these degrees as far as what it means in the job market later on. So if you put a Harvard degree online and you put it in Antarctica, people would still line up to go, even if they had to wear, chilly jackets, because basically, ultimately, they want that hard return on their investment when the child leaves the program, and they want the prestige of the program. So we're still seeing people applying in, continuously growing numbers. What we are seeing, though, is that, in the first year, kids can do courses online in some of the schools. This is not going to be around for a while. These schools value physical interactions on the in-person campus. So while there's a health risk, they're going to do some online blended learning. But, we anticipate within 1 semester or 2 semesters reverting to kind of fully on campus again. And the schools are sort of itching to get back to that. So, at worst, if you're literally going to college this year and you're doing a 4-year degree, you might spend 1 year in some sort of half online, half offline format. But on a go-forward basis, for families in this call who've got younger children, by the time you apply, this won't really be a factor. One thing that's worth noting is there's a growing trend of master's programs being offered online by top schools. For example, UPenn, which is an Ivy League school, is offering an online computer science course. So in the future, like 10 years, 5 years, we can expect a lot more universities to offer programs online. But undergraduate courses for the foreseeable future will really focus on campus as soon as these health things are reversed, which is like a temporary factor. So that's kind of what I'd say on that. We haven't seen it change the demand really for these top schools.
Yeah. Okay, good. And then, in terms of the services you offer, that's largely online anyway, in terms of what you do, with a bit of support offline, is it?
It is. So Crimson is, we're across 23 countries. We've got physical offices all across China and these other markets like, the US, New York, Russia, etc. But, all our service delivery can be provided online. So it's supposed to be very convenient, kind of meet the needs of students. We also have our online high school. So let's say you're currently, stranded in a particular country and, you can't get to your school. You can do a full high school education online with us. and all your college counselors. So Crimson is sort of very unaffected by COVID. It's been actually quite a big enabler for our growth in these school groups and stuff. So you can do it fully online if you want. But of course, some families have to come in and meet the team in person. It's totally fine and encouraged. But yeah, we can do it fully online. We can do the assessment process online and all the tutoring online as well.
Excellent. Well, we're running to the end of our time. So I get one more thing from you. I mean, if you're, one of our parents out there who are in China and they've got a 10-year-old kid who presumably has very little knowledge about what they want to be doing in the next 8 years' time, probably don't even know what they want to be doing next week. But, what should that parent be doing, planning? What can they be doing now?
Got it. So the first thing is you've got to have rigorous fundamentals in math and English. Being very strong in math is going to mean you can do physics, you can do economics, you can do chemistry, all these computer science, all these pathways unlocked. English, you're going to have to compete in the Western labor market, right, to some degree. So you need to have strong communication skills, writing and verbal, as well as public speaking skills. So get on that when the child is 10, absolutely. The next thing is interest discovery. Getting the child to be a passionate reader, it could be fiction, non-fiction, whatever, is good, because books provide a great way for children to rapidly learn about new industries quickly. The next thing is you want inspiring mentors that can help to kind of, get the child motivated to push a little bit. And that's why we often use quite young mentors who are, say, a 20-year-old at Harvard to help, a young 10-year-old to find that connection. So there are a couple of things that I'd recommend. And then I would also think international travel is useful. Seeing the skills, planting that seed, this is a goal for the family, is pretty good. And then finally, a good peer group. When you're 10, you're heavily influenced by your friends. And it's important, for a parent to be at least aware of the kind of, community around the child. Because you want to make sure that's a ambitious community of good people your son or daughter can learn from as much as possible, which is why some of these great schools offer a lot of comfort to parents who want to see that good environment around the young one. So there are a couple of tactics that I would recommend. I'd also recommend extracurricular exploration. So at this age, you can do a lot of sports. You can get involved in extracurriculars. You can do some volunteering. These things help to build character and get you ready for that US process. So there are a couple of things that I would throw out there.
Yeah. Excellent. That's really good. And I think that really leads on to what, a lot of what we talk about as well at this stage, because I think that gives us an overview, right? That gives us a broad across the board for lots of different families. But as we know, every single individual situation is different. And the important thing then is to be talking to people and that are going to understand your individual situation. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to give you guys an opportunity to say, okay, yep, great, fantastic information, but how do I learn more? How do I learn more about Crimson and what they can do to help children getting into university, but also how can deVere help you in terms of saving up for any costs that are coming in the future? So what I've put up there is a poll and just how you'd like us to contact you if you'd like to find out more information. Is it via email, WeChat, phone call, video call, or visiting our Shanghai office? So I'll leave that up there for you guys to respond to. And with that, Jamie, I'd like to say thank you so much for your time and thank you for your excellent presentation.
Thank you. It was really enjoyable. Have a great night. See you later.
Yeah. Thank you, Jamie. And to everyone out there, thank you all for attending. Thank you for your questions. If you do have more questions, we also have our webinar series group, which I know these guys are in there as well, so you can throw your questions into that group. But also, if you're not in the group, talk to whoever invited you or respond to the email that invited you to this webinar, and we'll get you into that group to find out about all of our other webinars coming up. We're fast approaching our 20th webinar, so lots of information for expats out there. So, and with that, thank you all and good evening.